Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Arriaga. I'm the Executive Director for the League of California Cities Latino Caucus. We welcome you to this great webinar that we're going to have today in the area of transportation. But more important, it's women in transportation. So this will be pretty exciting, listening to what they all have to say. We have a great list of panelists, great moderator, and so we're looking forward to it. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time with the intro. Other than to say that we hope that you'll join the Latino Caucus in the future. We offer numerous programs with this pandemic this year. This is now, I think, about our 6th webinar, probably our last for this year, going into the holidays, but I'm sure we'll resume again in January. So thank you again for attending. We will start out with our panelists soon, but we have a couple of people we'd like to introduce before then. First of all, these type of webinars and other things that this organization does throughout the year wouldn't be possible if we didn't have the support and partnership with various corporations throughout California. Today's host is Southern California Edison, a utility company out of the Los Angeles area. And with us today, we have Lisa Arenales. I hope I didn't chop that up too bad. Lisa is Senior Manager of E-Mobility Business Development and Partnership of Southern California Edison. She is responsible for business development activities, supporting SCE's vehicles, electrification program, and services. So very fitting for the topic today. So with that, Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, John, and thank you to the League's Latino Caucus for putting this roundtable together today. As mentioned, my name is Lisa Arenales. I'm a Senior Manager at Southern California Edison on our e-mobility team, e-mobility otherwise known as transportation electrification. I'm really glad to be here with all of you to open this up today on a subject that's obviously near and dear to my heart, Latinas in transportation. At SCE, we're committed to helping all of our customers participate in the clean energy future and to achieve California's ambitious environmental goals. SCE's Pathway 2045 white paper provides a blueprint for how California can achieve carbon neutrality in a way that is both practical and affordable. And this involves decarbonizing our grid and using this increasingly clean electricity to help other parts of the economy transition away from fossil fuels, specifically transportation and buildings. Last year, 51% of the electricity SCE delivered to customers came from pollution-free sources like solar, wind, and hydro. And we're on track to provide 100% carbon-free energy by 2045. In our clean energy future, the transportation sector will be largely electrified. Our recently approved Charge Ready 2 program will help install almost 38,000 chargers in SCE's service area alone. To put that in perspective, that's about as many chargers that exist in the entire state today. And yet it covers only about 1/3 of what we need in our service area. So electric vehicles will have a major cost advantage over combustion vehicles due to lower maintenance costs and declining battery prices over time. And while significant progress has already been made, unfortunately, Californians still breathe some of the worst air quality in the country. Tragically, people of color and less affluent communities in our state are suffering the most from harm from this pollution. You know, one of the silver linings and uplifting anecdotes from the shelter-in-place orders that we've had this year was that we were able to glimpse what was possible in Southern California. And in the early days of the stay-at-home order, researchers at UCLA found a 40% drop in particulate matter air pollution with the sharp reduction in driving and a stop to most commercial industrial sectors. And the transportation sector accounts for about 41% of the greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, and about 80% of the nitrogen oxide that forms smog. So it's no surprise then that California has, unfortunately, the highest asthma rate in the country, over 2.6 million people per the CDC. So we need to tackle that largest contributor to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, transportation. Electrification of the transportation sector will greatly improve local air quality, an urgent need across all of California. And we're working hard to help consumers learn more about electric vehicle options and provide incentives to help more people adopt these cleaner alternatives. Getting millions of new electric cars on the road will require us all to think about where we need to place charging stations, and we need to make it easy for folks to charge. We need to support from many industries to make that happen. At SCE, we're taking bold action to make this a reality. State officials recently gave us the approval to proceed with a massive new electric vehicle charging infrastructure program that will add 38,000 new chargers throughout our service territory. Our Charge Ready 2 program will ensure that all of our communities benefit. We'll make sure that at least half of those charging ports are located in disadvantaged communities that are most heavily burdened and impacted by the combined effects of economic, environmental, and public health burdens. Some stakeholders have asked whether the electric grid will be able to handle the increased demand of millions of electric vehicles. The answer is an emphatic yes. Based on our data-driven analysis, we project that our grid and energy supply will keep up with the demand for additional electricity. We have plenty of time to be able to plan for any additional demands from electrification. Many of the devices that are going to be connected to the grid, like EVs, are capable of receiving signals from the grid, and that means they can maximize the time they charge during off-peak hours when stress on the grid is lowest, and minimize charging during the on-peak hours when we have less clean power available. Finally, this clean energy future will be affordable. We forecast that the net spend on energy for the average customer will decline. There's a real opportunity after this pandemic to rebuild and finally address these injustices through intentional programs and policies that increase inclusivity and equity in jobs, education, housing, and health across our state. At SCE, we're striving for a future in which all communities, regardless of background or income level, can breathe cleaner air. It's a future filled with tremendous opportunity for California's economy in the form of clean transportation and energy jobs, as well as the proper training for those jobs. Making smart and effective investments now can help Californians get back to work while building a clean energy future. For example, through clean energy projects, transportation electrification infrastructure, electric vehicle manufacturing, and building electrification. Edison looks forward to partnering with you on how we can realize this future. Thank you again to the League's Latino Caucus for having me today, and thank you to everyone for participating in today's discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for you, and thank you for Southern Cal Edison for taking that lead in electrification. As we all know, California has been headed in that direction for some time. The governor recently had announced that by 2035, all new cars will be electrified or electrification type of cars. So I'm glad to see somebody's preparing for that with stations and so forth. So thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you for your support. With that, I'll just mention in case he comes on sometime soon, we had Congressman Josh Harder from the 10th District who had indicated that he was going to join us, and as we know, things come up. So if he does come up or join us soon, we'll let you know. But having said that, I'm going to go ahead and begin the.
I believe Adele, the representative from Congressman Harder, is on the line.
And that name is?
Adele Amador.
Okay, we'll try it right now. Just give us a minute, everyone. Okay.
There she is.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me and see me?
Is this a congressman? It sounds like it.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess I'm on my system. Yeah. Is this? Can you see me?
I can't see you yet.
Okay. Well, my video's on, and sorry if.
Oh. Okay. You're back on?
All right. Well,
Oh, there, we'll
fantastic.
see you
Well, I
now.
think we got it working, I guess.
So thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us. Congressman Josh Carter has just won re-election. This is going to be his second term, I believe, and he won overwhelmingly in the district. He's been a great supporter of transportation issues, a great supporter of women and in transportation, and just comes from the San Joaquin Valley. Good friend of Veronica Vargas, our board member and councilwoman from Tracy. And with that, Congressman, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to say a few words.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, John, and for the invitation. I'm so thrilled to be here to support the incredible leadership of our council member, Veronica Vargas, who has just done such incredible work for transportation. I represent the California Central Valley, Modesto, Tracy, Manteca, Turlock. And just to give you a sense of sort of what we're looking at a federal lens, I think transportation is going to be on the top of the agenda going into 2021 for two reasons. One is just look at where we are from an economic standpoint. We have to find opportunities to put people back to work as quickly and safely as possible. The way to do that, and I know this is a real centerpiece of President-elect Biden's agenda, is all around identifying investments in transportation and infrastructure. I mean, I think a lot about one of the really important projects here, Valley Link, which I know Veronica is going to talk about. We have 86,000 people that commute from my district, or at least did pre-COVID, across the Altamont Pass every single day for jobs that exist in the Bay Area. And so we have to make sure that those folks are better off. Instead of spending 5 or 6 hours a day in transit, that we create the opportunities for those folks to get mass transit, especially over the corridors where so many people travel for work every day. And the second reason why I think there's a real opportunity here is if you look at the election results, the American people in their wisdom look to have elected a Democratic House, a Democratic president, and a Republican Senate, which means we're going to have to find opportunities that bring people together and don't just cause people to retreat in their partisan corners. And one of the real important agenda items that both Republicans and Democrats across the country campaigned on was investments in infrastructure. You heard President Biden campaign on it. You heard President Trump campaigned on it. And so I think we really need to make sure that we're lifting this issue up, and especially making sure that California gets its share of the proceeds. Sometimes we don't always get what we deserve. We're a large state with a lot of diverse voices. If we work together, and organizations like the League of Cities are going to be really important in this, I think we're going to be able to be in a real strong position. And then the other thing that I just will talk about is just how important it is to have organizations like this lifting up the voices of Latino leaders, Latina leaders across our community. Representation is so critical. And as I look across the Central Valley, I represent a majority minority district. But a lot of our elected leaders don't always look like the community that they represent and that they serve. And so if we want to make good decisions, if we want to make better policy making, then we need to make sure that we are lifting up those voices that truly represent a cross section of the community that we have. I'm so excited to hear from all our panelists here. I also practice what I preach. The person that works on transportation and infrastructure projects in my district, Adela Amador, my deputy chief of staff, is a really incredible Latina leader. She has a real strong voice in Washington, and she's the centerpiece for these issues and making sure that we're getting things across the finish line. So as we move forward on a lot of these really important projects, I'm so glad to be by your side, and let me know how I can be working to prioritize the investments that you're suggesting and ensure that the diversity of our community is truly well represented in Washington. Thank you.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much. We're counting on you for bringing those dollars to California, and particularly to your district, because whatever you can do to help that crawl on 580 every morning and every evening, we will nominate you for sainthood after that. So thank you so much.
Work together to get it done. Yeah, I'm just taking the lead of whatever Veronica tells me to do. I'm here for it.
All right, very good. Well, thanks once again. So
thank you.
And with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator for this for today, a good friend and board member for the League of California Cities Latino Caucus, and that's Alicia Aguirre. She has been with the caucus now for a good number of years and has been a strong supporter of numerous issues. She's the first Latina to be elected as mayor for the city of Redwood City, and has been involved in many issues, has been often the lone voice in the area for immigrant issues, for equity issues, and so forth. She also has taken up the mantle for transportation and been very much involved in that. So we've got a moderator today who knows and understands transportation, and should be great at leading this. In the area of transportation, I'll just read a couple things. She has served as commissioner on the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, and was the first Latina ever to serve on this commission. She was instrumental in the formation of the San Mateo County Express Lanes JPE board, and was chair of the board. She currently chairs the Equity Study Advisory Committee for the San Mateo 101 Express Lane projects. And those are all, if anyone knows the Bay Area, all critical corridors for transportation for the many people who are traveling every day in the evening and so forth. So with that, Alicia, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for your support, and here we go.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Lisa, for your support, and thank you, Congressman, for being here and inspiring us on what is a great topic and a great need. As I think about it and see all the women or the lack of women in transportation when I've been on all of these commissions and boards, it excites me to see that women are coming forward and given a position. And it's not easy. It's not easy because usually the engineers and all of the people in transportation, all the top ones, are usually men. And so to see this changing in our state is really exciting. And so 55% of transit riders, as you know, are women, yet they represent only 35% of the workforce. And this is a lack of representation, particularly, as I mentioned, in the leadership level. And this is concerning when transit agency boards have the power to approve or deny services, raise fares, and develop equity, which to me is such an important piece of it. In addition, the government and transit officials are required to adapt service and safety requirements due to COVID, leaving many Californians essentially stranded. Accommodating these needs requires expertise and bold leadership, which favors equity, innovation, diligence, and collaboration. Today, we're going to listen to three amazing Latina leaders in transportation, because the Latino caucus knows the power of seeing diverse leadership. We acknowledge the importance of providing new resources and enhance our success as growth as leaders. Our speakers today not only exemplify the reform-minded individuals committed to making California's transportation modes effective and equitable, but also come from different regions. And what we were talking about, what I work on is in the Bay Area. Veronica's working, but what she mentioned and what the Congressman mentioned is I see so many of our folks that have been displaced and have moved to the Central Valley have to travel the corridors to make it. And that's the same in Southern California. So how are we bringing that mindset, that diverse mindset, into the transportation agencies that are so important? So I will start by introducing Michelle Martinez, California Transportation Commissioner. She's former League of California Cities board member. She served for 12 years as a council member at the city of Santa Ana. And Michelle is considered one of the nation's political change agents of her time and is recognized for her reputation as an effective regional public policy leader. She's drawn on her experience as a former elected official and her extensive network of relationships to support her life's purpose to put people first and create healthy, vibrant, and sustainable communities, and to collaborate with municipalities, private and nonprofit sector to identify the scale viable 21st century solutions. Since leaving office, public office, Michelle has been appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to the California Transportation Commission. In addition, she is currently working as policy advisor for the U.S. District Judge David O. Carter on the issue of homelessness for North and Central Orange County. Michelle has been listed as one of the 40 under 40 Latinas in American politics by the Huffington Post. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Alicia. And let me begin by thanking John and the Latino Caucus for convening this important webinar. I truly believe that if we're not at the table, we will be on the menu. And I think we're starting to see here in California that Latinas are at the table, and this is a representation, and more importantly, that the Latino Caucus, and specifically you, John, and the decades that you've been with this organization and wanting to ensure that we all have a seat at the table. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the League of California Cities, in particular the Latino Caucus, and being able to convene this webinar here this morning. One, to not just talk about our role in transportation as Latinos or Latina, but also the importance of equity and inclusion when we're talking about transportation investments, because these investments and infrastructure impact our communities. They impact our cities, they impact our region. And so it's imperative that we try to connect the dots and really understand that we're all interconnected. Whether you're from Northern California or Southern California, there is no boundaries when we're talking about our roads, our bridges. So our infrastructure is all interconnected. Many of us, for Thanksgiving weekend, I decided to do a staycation. And so went with my brother on the road in an RV, and we ended up in Pismo Beach, right? And so, you know, I left Southern California from Malibu all the way to Pismo Beach and down Pacific Coast Highway, and just enjoying, one, the roads because they weren't very congested, but two, the scenery. And I think it's important for us to understand that it doesn't matter if we're from a rural community and or from an urban city when it pertains to our connectivity and our network of our systems. What I wanted to highlight, and I think it's important, is the following. Transportation's infrastructure investments have shaped our communities for many generations. They both, by expanding and limiting our options, many of our roads in our communities, we've been able to get those funded by the federal government and also the state government. But some of these investments and expansion of our roads, we have to be honest, have been detrimental in certain communities. You know, I think during the Floyd protests, there has been conversations about equity and inclusion and social justice and environmental justice. And really, what does all of this mean when we're talking about transportation? Well, it's imperative because we cannot talk about environmental justice, climate, and in particular, we were just, Edison was just talking about electrification. The reality is, as we move towards electrification, who is that benefiting? And in particular, right now in the Latino community, there are very few communities that have the charging capacity or infrastructure and or two can afford an electrical vehicle. And so when we talk about equity, we need to ensure that our policies include equity and inclusion. And that's by the policymakers, whether it's at the local level or someone like myself. And it's a great honor to serve on the California Transportation Commission and appointed by Governor Newsom, who definitely sees the nexus and wanting to ensure that we are able to connect the dots with climate, with environmental justice, with housing, because we have to focus on the whole system. We can't focus on parts of a system. And I think for a very long time, we have been focused on parts of a system like transportation, and then we go to housing, and then we go to climate change. The reality is it's all one system. And when we focus on just parts, we're not able to connect these dots and there's unintended consequences. And so with that, I also want to highlight the importance for those of you who are at the local level that you can't talk about transportation and not talk about land use. They go hand in hand. And it's and someone said this, and I don't know who, I'm not sure if it was Chuck Marone from Strong Towns or someone else, but they said addressing congestion without considering land use is like traveling to the moon without considering gravity. Let me repeat that again. Addressing congestion without considering land use is like traveling to the moon without considering gravity. And I think this is what we've done for a very long time in California. If you look at our land use patterns and I have seen that it's been our transportation investments and infrastructure that have led the way as it pertains to our land use, because the state will say, you know, we have no local control. The locals will say, we don't want the state taking our local control. But when you're making these massive investments, in particular with transportation, they're interconnected to our housing patterns, to economic development, to ensuring that we have multimodal opportunities. And particularly in the Latino community, most of our communities, and Alicia mentioned that earlier, you know, folks are taking transit, they're taking, you know, buses, they're riding their bikes, they're walking to and from, in particular women who are using this system. And I think it's important for us to understand that we need to ensure that we can connect these dots. And I continue to say connecting these dots because the amount of transportation investments that have been made in California, and I just want to give for the 2018-2019 period, the total federal, state, and local transportation funding in California was about $35 billion in 2018 and 2019. And this is for highways, local roads, high-speed rail, intercity rail, transit, and active transportation. In particular, the California Transportation Commission that I represent, we allocate about $7 billion annually. That is a lot of money. When we translate that money into the reduction of congestion, I think many of us, in particular the congressman members, spoke about that. I think one of the biggest concerns that we always do talk about is congestion, and thinking that putting these kinds of investments is going to reduce congestion by just expanding our highways. Well, I will be the first to tell you that I came from a community like Santana where 56% of our residents didn't have access to a personal vehicle. They walked and biked, but the third leading cause of death when I first got elected was being hit by a car. And I couldn't understand when I first got elected, and that was 14 plus years ago, that why were we making investments to expand our arterial highways versus making investments that were safer for active transportation, for people to walk and bike, or to make sure they're able to get to a bus stop that was safe. And then again, it's because not understanding, and yes, transportation funding is very complex. And sometimes we don't understand a lot of the plans from the regional level, from your transportation agency to your MPO, and how these monies are coming down and flowing down to the local level. And I believe it's imperative as a member of the California Transportation Commission that we start to educate local communities, not just the transit agencies or MPOs, but community members and local elected officials about the funding mechanisms and the restrictions that we currently have on the books, and what can we do to change these guidelines and restrictions to ensure that we're able to invest more money into active transportation, to more transit opportunities, so that our communities can prosper and thrive. I am not against the car. I'm not against, you know, highways. I believe it's all part of a network. But where you look at where most of the investments have been made in expanding our highways. Enough is enough. We need to tell a new story. And that new story is no longer about how do we reduce congestion, but how do we move to providing access for everyone here in California that can prosper and thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Wise words. Transportation and housing go together. And if we don't have those pieces, you know, I mean, all the pieces that we've been talking about, we know that it's a challenge. You can't just fix your highways and not build the infrastructure and all the pieces, whether it's pedestrians, bikes, and everything else. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to next introduce Nuria Fernandez, who's the General Manager and CEO of Santa Clara Valley Transit Authority. She has more than 35 years of experience and has made a name for herself as an aspiring leader in transportation industry. She is the General Manager and CEO of Santa Clara Valley Transit Authority, VTA. She is responsible for 2,100 employees delivering projects, programs, and transit services that provide mobility solutions for more than 2 million people who live and work in Silicon Valley. Fernandez is responsible for the creation of BTA's Innovation Center, an incubator to encourage collaboration, test and latest technology, and imagine new ways to keep the Valley moving forward by leveraging the expertise of Silicon Valley's high-tech corporations and universities. Fernandez was appointed acting federal transit administrator by President Bill Clinton, where she enabled the administration of more than $1 billion in annual grant funding to local communities for planning, design, and construction and new expanding rail and bus systems. She served as chair of the American Public Transportation Association and leading the national organization in the advancement and advocacy of innovation, workforce, and development membership growth. She was born and raised in Panama City, Panama, immigrating to the United States to pursue her bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a master's in business administration. Here we have an amazing woman who is an engineer and a Latina. Luria.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and good morning to all of you. And thank you, John. I too want to express my appreciation to you and the Latino Caucus for including me in this very important conversation. It's really great to be in the company of such great women. And Michelle, wow, I can see why you are in the 40 under 40. That is terrific. Thank you for all you're doing. You know, as an Afro-Latina, I have found myself to be the only woman of color or of Latino background in many of the rooms that I've been in over these past 30 years. You know, that can be a bit daunting, but it's also an opportunity. I am sure that many of you have also had that experience. As Alicia mentioned, I was born and raised in Panama. As I was thinking about my field of study, I wanted to be an architect, but my dad said, you know, why don't you pursue a career in engineering? That way you can make a difference in all areas and not just beautifying things, but actually connecting. And he was thinking transportation more so than I was at the time. So even though many of my classmates decided to become lawyers and doctors, that's a big thing back home. Everyone wants to have a child that's a lawyer or a doctor. I went on to becoming an engineer and was the one of 3 engineers in my graduating class at the university. So that just shows you about women choosing these technical fields. When one of the things that has been defining in my path is the opportunities that I saw and the people that I reached out to, and then those that supported me. It's very difficult being a woman of color in a field like transportation, which is male dominated. Even though we're seeing more and more women coming into our field, the reality is that it's still male dominated, and many of the policies that were described earlier, the policymakers and the policies are defined by an experience that wasn't our experience. And we are now dealing with the results of that. I think that there clearly is opportunities. I feel, in fact, that all of us have a responsibility to help those who are thinking about getting involved in transportation, those who are trying to get jobs in transportation. So whether we're heading up a transit agency like I am doing now, or if we're in an elected position where we can influence the public policy, the regulations, and importantly, funding, whether it's through CTC, MTC, or state DOT, I think that looking at those solutions that move us and that moves our communities of color are going to be significant, because it's critical that the leadership in our profession be diverse and a mirror of the people that we serve. So there's so much that we as Latinos bring to a table, and the Latinas making decisions that affect the lives in very significant ways. So I want to commend the caucus for what it's doing. Also to take a bow, because you know, we talk about the challenges, we talk about not seeing enough of us making these decisions, but there are more than 1,600 elected Latinos in office throughout California. Now, California is the largest and most populous state, so that may get lost in translation. But close to 7,000 Latinos are elected across the country. So clearly 1,600 is a nice percentage of what that total is. So that means that there's more advocating, more mentoring, more leading, but not becoming complacent. In the 100 largest cities in America, of those cities have Latina mayors. We had a mayor that's on here today, but today there is Tucson, Arizona, and Chula Vista. Two. God bless those two mayors. We need more Latinas elected running cities, because the cities are the workhorses of our community. It's where decisions are made that affect our public the education. It affects the ability of people to get jobs, to be trained, to access jobs through local streets and road construction, etc. So just 5 years from now, from data I've seen in 2025, 1 out of every 2 new workers entering the workforce in our country will be Latino. We know that 27% Latinos depend on public transportation because we have that data in the National Transportation Database. So, and as our community continues to grow fast and our ethnicity continues to explode in the American workforce, we need to elect leaders that are paying attention to the needs of our growingly diverse communities. And we can do that best when our leaders look like us and they speak and understand our issues. So since the massive demonstrations that we all experienced from the social justice that happened this last spring and over the summer, we've become much more aware of how equity fits into the public transportation system. At my agency, we are in the same boat. Other transit agencies are across the country. We're dealing with challenges as a result of the devastating pandemic. We're losing riders, and that means we're losing fares. That means that we have less income coming in through taxes. And we yet have to continue providing that essential service because we don't know where people live and we don't know where they're going. But if they're essential, we need to get them there. My ridership is down 80% from its pre-COVID levels. And it's very similar across the country. We talked about some issues that are happening in Southern California. I can tell you right here in the Bay Area, San Francisco Municipal Railway, Muni, we have the Golden Gate. Everyone is cutting staffing, and they're also revising their service. And that means if service stops in some communities or service is not as frequent in some communities, people are going to not be able to get the jobs, or they're going to get to their jobs late and get fired. So this is something that requires a lot of attention. Even though we're seeing a little uptick on our ridership, now that we're back into the purple level, and you all appreciate the colors, that is going to bring a lot of the plans that we had in mind to a grinding halt. And we're going to have to rethink how we continue providing service if the income is not going to be available. As you all know, at the federal level, we were all very hopeful that there was going to be a second go around of an emergency relief fund. And we're extremely elated when we heard that there was a bipartisan group in the Senate that had come up with a proposal for $900 billion, of which $45 billion would go into transportation, of which $15 billion of that 45 will come into public transit. Senator McConnell announced a different bill that has $0 for transportation overall. So that does not bode well for us. Many of our transit agencies within this state are seeing that they're going to have to make some decisions because they're this much closer to the cliff. So what does that mean? It means that our community, which is predominantly individuals who rely on public transportation, may have one car, multiple cars, but not everyone is going to the same place at the same time. So that dependency on public transportation is important. Plus, we also are a great percentage of the service workers that are helping these hospitals stay in operation, that are helping our food distribution, etc. I'm not sharing anything you do not know. So because of the essential work that we're providing, we need essential service, and public transportation is part of that essential service. Women play a great role in how we move people and the decisions that are made around moving people. Women at my agency are involved with everything from safety all the way to helping with customer service. Because we know that it's at every touch point we're communicating. We spend a lot of time doing outreach to all of our communities, in particular, because we have such a large community on our east side of individuals who are low income and are in need of continued service and access, are in need of broadband, in need of communication, that we in transportation and public transit can help. We can get those buses with the Wi-Fi into those communities, onto those communities are clearly brought up to speed with technology and connection. We can do kinds of things that others can't do right now because we have the fleet of buses to be able to provide those access and connectivity. But we can only do that as long as there's funding coming in and available to help us do that. We're working. We're not giving up. We're working at looking at options and the local front. I serve on the Blue Ribbon panel for the Transit Recovery Task Force. That's was part of the Bay Area Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and that we were able to receive funding through the first allocation of the federal dollars. The challenges now is where does the additional money come from as the 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area are trying to figure out what's next in their decision making for continuing providing service. So that too is on the list of priorities that need to be focused on. As chair of the American Public Transportation Association, I am advocating together with all of the hundreds of transit agency general managers for additional funding. We've asked Congress to provide $32 billion nationwide in help, in relief, so that we can see our way through this dark time and stay afloat through the end of our this current fiscal year, which ends next June, or at least through the end of the calendar year 2021. So we're hopeful. We're keeping our fingers crossed. We're looking to our President and Vice President-elect to work with Congress and pass the HEROES Act so that there is money flowing through to preserve the critical essential service that public transit is, the backbone of our communities. In terms of what women are doing, there's this great cohort that I wanted to point out of that women, including many Latinas, that are doing great things in Southern California to better understand how women travel. They completed a study that was sponsored by LA Metro, the Los Angeles Transit System, and it's titled Understanding How Women Travel, that provides an in-depth review of the challenges that women face when they're using public transit, when they're traveling with their children, with strollers, when they're traveling by themselves late at night, the whole issue about safety and fair equity. And I think that this is something that needs to be highlighted because these are the kinds of reports that open our eyes to what others are not seeing. And that is that we have some very unique challenges, and it cannot just be one solution that will fit all of us. There are some very specific solutions that are indigenous to women, but then as we're looking at those specific things that affect women, we also need to be cognizant of the very specific areas that our minority communities need attention paid to. So there, as I continue to work to move people in our great Silicon Valley, I look forward to working with all of you and continue to be connected so that this great state that we live in can do all of the right things to bring the access to opportunities for all who live here, and to pay attention to those who have been left behind, who have not been able to keep up because of the inequities that in the decision-making, the policy-making, and the land use determinations that have put many of us in a situation where we now have to play catch up and need a lot of help in just getting to that finish line. So thanks again, and please all stay healthy and safe in these very difficult times that we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nudia, for everything that you are sharing, and what a role model. I hope to invite you to speak to my students at Kenyatta College. I'm a professor, and I'm always motivating our Latina students, especially to go into STEM and to get into some of these careers. And they need to see someone that looks like us to do that. One of the things that you mentioned earlier that it's been a challenge is that in the Bay Area, we have 27 transportation agencies. Just think about that and the challenge of connecting those. But you know, the leadership, I think, is looking at ways, how can a person get on a bus in Modesto and make it to San Francisco, or get on a train, or, you know, how do we make that connectivity happen? And we know how important that is. And Michelle, you talked about equity and the importance. And I think every single new transportation link has to have that equity piece, because we know that our folks travel in different ways. And we actually went to LA Metro, who has a really good equity program, and we're kind of modeling it after. So that's where we have to learn from each other's agencies and see what we're doing to really serve the communities that we are serving or that we are representing. But with that, I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Veronica Vargas, who's on the board with me. She comes from the city of Tracy as Mayor Pro Tem. She's not only a League of California Cities Latino Caucus member, she's also the League of California Cities Vice Chair of Transportation Committee Chair, no surprise there, and Vice Chair of the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Regional Rail Authority. As a representative of the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Regional Rail Authority, that's a mouthful, Veronica Vargas has been champion and leader for the multi-million Valley Link project. This multi-generational rail project will create a link between Dublin, Pleasanton, BART Station, and the Lathrop in the Central Valley, and bring much needed relief to the super commuters in our community. Currently, Veronica is a project manager for Agora Land Consulting Incorporated. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I want to say thank you, ladies, for the trailblazing efforts, because I've been quietly observing and hearing and studying many of you. And this project that I'm going to talk about puts both of your views into one single project. The connectivity from people, jobs, and housing. Transportation absolutely cannot happen without use, cannot happen without accurate funding, and bringing other agencies together. We can create more silo agencies. We need to network with others so we can connect people from different areas into a mega regional connection. And especially now the jobs are, and people are traveling more than 3 to 4 hours to get to their jobs. With that said, I'm showing you guys what the group, the Valley Link group, has been working on for the last 5 years. And this probably will answer some of the questions of the panel, the people that are in our meeting. They're asking, what do I do? How can I help my community? Be patient, it takes a long time. Transportation projects do not happen overnight. And collaboration. I think our project is extremely lucky to have a network of 15 different people that are involved. And those are the group that form the JPA, but we'll also have congressmen like Congressman Harder, and Assemblywoman Ekman was the one who actually wrote this bill to create this JPA. And we have the Senate and other people involved. So it takes a collaboration of many people to just get something together. With that said, Erica, could we start the presentation? So Valley Link is a 42 miles of rail that will be connecting people to housing and jobs from the Bay Area in the San Francisco area to the Central Valley and San Joaquin and above. Next slide, please. Near 100,000 commuters a day pre-COVID travel over the Intersect 580 from the San Joaquin Valley to the Bay Area. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission in the Bay Area anticipated traffic conditions could return to pre-COVID levels within the next 3 to 5 years. And the 580 between the San Joaquin County and the Bay Area, as you can see in the picture, is particularly troublesome. Studies by the Bay Area Council have traffic increasing and on this segment of freeway between 2016 and 2040 about 75%. And for the good movements, the truck traffic that you guys see to your left of the screen is projected to increase 58% at the same time period. Next slide, please. Here is a map that Congressman Harder just talked about earlier today. The Bay Area Council shows the 3 main commuters corridor into the Bay Area. As you can see, the commuters from the northern San Joaquin is more than twice as large as the other 2 commuters corridor, and is growing in a higher pace the other commuters corridor in the 580 area. Next slide, please. This is the wonderful group of people and the board of directors created. And I want to say that I don't want to not mention our chairman, Scott Haggerty, who is retiring after 24 years of service. He's a champion in transportation and one of my mentors in this endeavor on transportation. The 580 commuter corridor in 2017 created by legislation with Assembly Bill 758, Susan Eggman's bill, with this JPA. And shortly after the creation was approved by the governor, the legislation created the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Railroad Authority and give the authority the plans to construct the passenger rail project now called Valley Link. The board has a 15-member agency, and we meet once a month to work on our project. And we are a working group. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the project. This snapshot shows the Valley Link first early run of our transportation through the Bay Area and Lathrop. This also anticipates to have 2 intermodal connections between the ACE north of Lathrop and the Dublin Pleasanton. Earlier, Michelle talked about the importance of connecting intermodal projects, and this does that. The 42 miles of project has a 7 stations phase with expected ridership of 33,000 people daily, and a reduction of greenhouse emissions of 42,000 tons. Valley Link will be the key transportation backbone between the San Joaquin County and the Bay Area, with easy connection from the ACE and BAR rail system. Additional Valley Link supports the State Valley Plan, the Valley Link supports the state rail plan to connect the Northern California mega region to the state rail system. Important to note that transit-oriented development is taking place within the half mile of the stations. For example, the city of Livermore and Isabel Station, the city is projecting a new TOD that just went through the Planning Commission and is anticipated to create over 4,000 units of housing near the station. Here in Tracy, plannings are the same, and Lathrop as well. TODs, transit-oriented development, is key to make sure that people have the accessibility to the stations. Next slide, please. Valley Link is planning for a zero-emission train technology being considered in the environmental work are electrical battery-operated trains. This train will operate on battery in San Joaquin Valley and will connect to a catenary line over the Altima, where the train will have ample power to keep the speed and also receive power to recharge onboard batteries. Additionally, the city of Tracy is providing property for the operations and maintenance facility, which will have enough land to have solar fields power to, they can power the facilities near the train. Next slide, please. So the group wanted to make sure that we have an economic impact study to figure out what is the impact in creating jobs. Valley Link will be important to the emerging from the difficulty COVID economic impacts. A recent economic impact study of Valley Link shows that during the construction of the project can create 22,000 jobs and an economic impact on this region of $3.5 billion. During operations, Valley Link can create 395 potential jobs in the operations and many facilities, and the economic impact of $69 million annually. Next slide, please. Here is the cost range for the Valley Link project and in this year's expenditures. Also, the slides has the funding identified for this project, and it is anticipated that additional funds to complete this project will come from local, state, and federal sources. Additional local sources could come from projects being included in the future transportation sales taxes. Both of the 9 counties in the Bay Area and San Joaquin County, as well as additional values capture opportunities near the Valley Link station. Next slide, please. And this is an exciting chart, at least for me. We've been looking for this for quite some time. This is the Valley Link physically constrained schedule. What is important to know is that we will finish up the EIR of this project in early 2021. It's currently, actually today, the EIR went public. And quickly we're moving to the environmental clearance and 30% assigned for the project. At the end of the schedule, in the green little arrow in the bottom of the screen, it's what is the most important. Valley Link starts date for carrying passengers, which could be as late as 2027 to early 2028. As you can see, it takes some time to create a project on this magnitude because of the coordinations that have to be done with multiple agencies, multiple cities, and line users through our multiple agencies, 2 counties and 7 cities. That concludes that portion of the presentation. And I hope that helps to some of the questions from the people that are participating in this webinar. And we can close that, Erica, if you like. I'm excited because we talked about in theory and how what can we do in projects like this that has the opportunity to bring multiple people together, collaborating to a larger vision. For me was a lot of what Nuria mentioned earlier is seeking the opportunity. People that were displaced. I was one of those commuters that was stuck in the traffic 2.5 hours just to get to work. So I felt that I was spending about 4 hours to 5 hours of my day in traffic. And I felt that was an injustice. And I grew up in Argentina in very different circumstances, very humble beginnings. And our bus system rocks in there. And it's a bus every 5 minutes. People move all the time. There is a very small population that owns vehicles. I figure, how come we're not doing this here? And how come we're not collaborating with other agencies? And so I just been lucky to just bump into our chairman, and we started talking, and we created this group, this idea, and from that moment, it just spiraled and created more momentum. So it is a multi-generation project, especially now with time limits. It is our obligations as leaders to pass the knowledge along to the next generations of elected officials so they can take that torch and carry it on to the end of the line and getting those projects started. And once we are completed, this is creating an opportunity for people to have a better quality of life, to help our environment. I have 5 boys and 1 girl, and 2 of my boys have severe asthma, and it's because of the environment that we are in. And we have to do our part to collaborate to make sure that we facilitate and make efforts to better our country, our cities, and our state. So I am elated to be in this panel with you all. It's magnificent to just be in your guys' presence, and I thank you all for taking the time to participating. And I hope this was something that the public enjoy as well.
Thank you so much, Veronica, and for your passion and bringing together. I feel like you're bringing them to the Bay Area, and we're making these connections so that, you know, we have people at both ends embracing these opportunities and working. I have a question.
Yeah, if you don't mind, one of the comments that was done was about the 27 agencies. Well, the cool part about this JPA group is that they're not interested. We're not interested in creating another transportation agency, but we are hiring and we're looking for an existing agencies to actually run this transportation project. Let's be smarter and wiser. Let's use the resources that we have and not create another agency and another red tape. So I wanted to make sure, a good point for Nuria on that. I'm just totally big believer on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. I'd like to take a question that has been put into the chat, and I ask others if you're interested to add your questions. This would be a good time. This is from Jesse, and he says, my area is Yolo County. Winters is moving to a microbus on demand model and ending our bus routes. What steps can we take to support this as an equitable choice? My fear is that our undocumented riders might not be comfortable calling for a microbus to come to their homes. Jesse Winters, City Council and Chair of Yolo Bus. Who would like to take that one?
Alicia, if I may, because that's a very interesting question. I hadn't thought about that because we too are considering microtransit. But one of the possible solutions is not have the vehicle come to your house. It's to identify collection points that are central to communities, to neighborhoods, and then having, because that's what transit works best, is many to one. So collecting people to get them to a city center or a high activity center. And that way you don't have to be concerned about people know where you live, or I thought the question was going to be about technology and how to call and get registered for the service, which is still a challenge for many who do not have access to technology. But on the safety and personal privacy, I think that considering collection locations rather than having it come to service like an Uber or Lyft, but do something different.
Excellent. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that question? You know, it's interesting because when I lived in Mexico City, I did the microbuses, right? And I think Veronica was talking about different parts of the world where you can get on mini buses or others and move very quickly. But that's because we have very different density issues in our area, especially in Southern California. Like one city to the other city, there's not that connectivity as we have in big cities like Mexico City and Hong Kong and others, where everybody's congregating. You can get a bus and move every 5 minutes. So we have different challenges, and it has to do with what Michelle started talking about, which was land use, you know. Mm-hmm. So Michelle, let me start with you. Why is transportation funding equity important for our communities of color?
Thank you, Alicia. And let me just start off by saying community is always the answer. You know, when we're able to provide access and a process that allows for true community engagement, those that are being impacted by transit are those who are riding our transit systems and or who are walking or biking. And so it's imperative that we ensure that we create processes that are equitable and inclusive to the people that we represent and who we serve. I think a lot of times as government entities, we tend to talk about outreach and engagement, But sometimes we as government, we don't know how to engage, the appropriate folks. We just talked about an undocumented population is very different than just say a millennial generation where they understand technology, they're more comfortable taking Ubers and Lyfts. They care less, possibly more about their privacy, as they're always on Google. And I think we all know when we're on Google, the algorithms come in, next you're on Facebook. If you looked at Target on Google, where the nearest Target was, it's now on your Facebook. So I think, when we're looking at from a generational perspective, or from an immigrant community perspective, or just a basic community perspective, we have to understand, just like not all cities are created equally, not all communities are created equally, because of the processes and the guidelines that we set that sometimes exclude people from the very beginning about the process. And so when I talk about equity and inclusion, we need to make sure that we start from the premise of what these principles are, what these guidelines are, and not just say, hey, we're now going to infuse equity in all our policies, and then put a plan together, and then put it on the shelf. But it's ensuring that we go out from the very beginning and invest in our local communities and our young people and our moms and everyone that wants to be involved and engaged. So that I always say that when people care about something, and Veronica talked about it earlier, something impacted her, she cared deeply about it, and she was able to get others that had the same passion. And guess what? Now they have a JPA, they're moving towards connectivity, creating a system that's going to work for their community. It only took one person. And that's what's so important. I'm trying to connect these dots, because I think when we talk about transportation in general, or we talk about equity and inclusion, these are great words, but what's the meaning of it? Change is change, but if we don't change the meaning of change, and that's our belief system. I'm a dialectical thinker. There was a time when I was elected that I thought a certain way. I am no longer elected. I'm appointed to the California Transportation Commission. So I have a new role. So I think a little differently. My belief system has changed a little, even though I'm a champion for cities. But I also understand that I have to work with the private sector, with transit agencies, and create a network that's inclusive, that represents all in California. So it's no longer just my city. And so, our mindsets and our beliefs change. And so we don't just say change for change's sake, but we got to change the meaning of what that believes as it pertains to our beliefs. And today we have to tell that new story. Who do we choose to be for this time? I think that's very important for us to talk about. When we're talking about equity and inclusion, who do we as individuals choose to be for this time? But who do we choose to be for the communities that we represent? Because we are all in positions of power and of influence. And we have the opportunity to start having these conversations and ensuring that equity is just not a word, inclusion is not just a word, that is actually engaging people who we represent, who can be at the table and not at the menu. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And I think for all of us, especially all of us who represent communities of color, that has to be our umbrella issue on top of everything, whether it's transportation, housing, children, families, everything that we look at. And as you mentioned, we are at the table, and how do we get there? We need to ask those questions, right? How are we setting up an equity program for Valley Transit? How are we setting up equity programs in Southern California? What do they look like? What do they represent? How viable are they? And if we're not there to ask those questions, nobody is. And it's not out of not wanting to serve the community, but not having that connection that we do. And I think that's important. So what we bring to the table is more than that. It's bringing that whole community and backing that up. So I think that that's very important. And I always keep that front and center, especially with what we're going through COVID, with what our communities are suffering, with all of the issues of racial equity. It's made all of us look at things with a different lens, and a lens that we've always seen. And how do we bring that to transportation, right? So that takes me to, and we just have a few minutes, but I have a question for Nudia and then for Veronica. So Nudia, in the short term, transit officials are asking Congress to come up with more emergency funding to respond to the effects of COVID pandemic. But how can Congress continue to help with what will surely be long-term effects of the pandemic on transit? And as you mentioned earlier, all of our transit agencies are suffering.
Yes, we are in this really unfortunate conundrum. And but we have to be hopeful that there is going to be a post-COVID, and we are in a position now where we can define what the future of transit should be in that post-COVID, because we've learned a lot. We've seen the inequities, we've seen the destruction that we have made unintentionally through construction of highways and rail systems through communities that could really use a hand up. So looking at long-term, the first, after getting the emergency funding, which is number one, and that should happen through some, I hope by January 21st, the next thing is to take on the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act. The FAST Act is expired last September 30th. It was extended through next year, but that means that action for what that new 6-year bill, no more short-term bills, but a 6-year, $145 billion over 6 years for transit solutions throughout this country, just to be able to use for operations, for the small systems, the rural areas, and for capital maintenance, and for new construction for everyone else. So that needs to happen. We cannot continue in this extension of existing laws, because there are new things that need to be introduced. And one of them is restoring the 20% of the share that comes from the Federal Highway Trust Fund, the Mass Transit Act, to bus capital grants. There are more bus systems in this nation than there are rail. And along the way, that distribution, that funding, the percentage allocation got revised, but we need to go back to the way it was. And then, of course, looking at innovation. We cannot set a blind eye to innovation. Innovation is here, it's happening. We need to embrace it, and we need to make sure that that innovation touches every aspect of our community. We have large rural areas. Everyone thinks, when you think California, you think that, LA and San Francisco and San Diego. We have large rural areas that need access. Our rural operators also serve as emergency responders. They're moving people in those small vehicles to hospitals in metropolitan areas where there's trauma centers. We do so much. People think that all we do is daily movement of commuters. We are the ones with a large fleet of buses that in the event of a natural disaster will have to pull up in front of hospitals and move people to higher ground or to safety, relocate entire communities when there's fires. And that's one of the reasons why we are essential. We're essential because we keep this nation moving. So that long-term bill, $145 billion, needs to happen.
Thank you. I just want to mention something very quick from Nicole Ramos, who said, Omni-Trans in San Bernardino, we recently began micro-transit in one city and use virtual stops throughout the area to facilitate demand response service that is convenient but not entirely personalized. This program is app-based, but reservations are also available by phone. Seems to be working well so far. Thanks for the great discussion. Thank you, Nicole, for giving us that information, because we know there are people here from all over the state and it looks a little bit different. So Veronica, with you, what is next? What is next in as you move forward in doing transportation with your area to different areas, Southern California, Northern California, and how can we make sure that there are more Latina women on that amazing board that you serve on? It looks great, but we could have more, especially considering the area that you serve. The area that you serve in the Central Valley, and how important and valuable that is.
Thank you. Well, what is next? We need to go get those fundings. With those fundings, we can build this project. So we have a good start. There's a good matching monies for a lot of federals and state grants. And for the ongoing maintenance is the discussion, the FAST, and grants that, we need to be updated. So we need to collaborate. I think to be more inclusive, we need to continue our mentorship. And that's what I'm excited at having this discussion. I'm hoping the Latinos and minorities don't shy away from large projects like this in central communities. There are disconnections, and it's the opportunity on those connections to make those connections, and we need to see that and grab those challenges. And I know, Chuck, everybody, at one point when I started talking about this project several years ago, 6 years ago, it was one mayor who told me that the Councilwoman Vargas believes about rainbows and lollipops if I was going to ever get this project off the ground. And those lollipops are the sweetest lollipops I have, experienced in the last 6 years, because look at where we are now, is not seeing the mountain for the mountain, enjoying the journey, one step at a time, one little, study at a time, bringing people together, enjoying the work that we're doing. I will be dismissed to say that a lot of, when you're excited about something, you bring excitement and you collaborate with people that feel the same way. Our executive director, Michael Tree, his team, Marianne Payne, and many others. I'm going to forget somebody's name, and I don't want anybody to get mad, but you don't do this alone. You may be the cheerleader out there, the one elected to just gather the masses, but our staff is unbelievable and make things move forward. So what is next for me is just hoping that the next group of elected officials, young people that just got elected, and in my council, we have a good turn. We have 2 new council members, and young too, in their 20s, some of them, to inspire them to take over our seat and to bring other areas within the Central Valley, the Northern California, the Bay Area, the Southern California, and connecting everybody, see where those missing things are, and creating those opportunities to connect us together. Be a bus, connections, be a train. We need to facilitate people's movement, the freedom, so they can just get to work. And pro-COVID, we need to create projects that are ready, shovel ready, to promote the economy. And what better way as one of these projects? Think about 22,000 new jobs could be created with one single project. What a way to just start the economy and help people in this pandemic to just get back to work. So hopefully that answers the question. Thank you, Alicia, for agreeing to being our moderator. I know you're super busy between class, but you're someone to admire, and for all that you have done to give us the opportunity to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you. And this kind of concludes. I just we can't end something like this without saying that we need to do more, a call to action. And the call to action is, how do we bring others forward to be part? How do we bring other Latinas? So all of you listening out there, look at these amazing women and make sure you invite them to mentor, to speak, to be on webinars, because they are the role models of the future. And I want to make sure that our young women and men have this opportunity to be in transportation or in any other leadership position. And it takes us bringing others forward. To me, that's my mantra. How do I bring others forward to be in the seats that we are? Because at some point I want to take a break, and I want to make sure that it's taken over with someone that really represents our community. So I want to thank the Latino Caucus. John, thank you so much. Thank you to each one of my panelists. You were all amazing, and I'm so proud to call you my colleagues in transportation as Latinas. So there is the website for the League of California Cities. This is our 30th year, and being in as part of the League of Californians, and we're very proud to continue the work. As John mentioned, we have a series of webinars because we want to continue to connect with our community statewide. So thank you very much. John, any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to thank everybody again and look forward to having you join us in 2021. Wishing you all a Merry Christmas and look forward to talking to you and the audience again. Thank you.
Feliz Navidad.
Feliz
All right.
Navidad.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.